Hi everyone and welcome. Today we are in the wonderful presence of Professor Karen Iseminger from the University of Indianapolis. Welcome Karen and thank you so much for being here.
Oh, it's my joy. Thank you so much for doing the work that you do and having this caring channel and interested in nursing presence and caring. It's all wonderful. So thank you.
Right. Thank you. So it's my privilege to introduce you to our audience, to say that you are Professor Emeritus and Professor of Nursing with tenure at the University of Indianapolis. You're also a faculty member at the Center of Aging and Community. In addition to that, you have a clinical practice as a nurse practitioner, ethics consultation and patient advocacy you are involved with. And then also you served on the American Nurses Association National Center for Ethics and Human Rights Advisory Board for 8 years. So welcome and thank you for being here with us.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. My honor and my joy.
Great, thanks. Karen, I came across your article that you wrote with your colleagues on nursing presence, and you call it a healing presence, healing during existential moments, the art of nursing presence. And that inspired me and my colleagues so much in our quest on doing research on presence, and it was very helpful for us in defining presence and also in how to facilitate presence. So I'm very curious to hear more about your interest in presence, your career, and what insights you gained throughout your career.
Oh, well, my career, I have the 3 degrees, of course, the BSN in nursing, and I did a lot of work in that area in oncology, more or less. And again, you are with patients, you get the privilege of being with patients at their existential moment. You know, why do they have cancer? How their life is going to change? What are their values? How they can create a legacy, etc. So that was at the that BSN level. And then I got my degree a long time ago. Let's just say a long time ago as a nurse practitioner. I was one of the first, not the first, but I mean, very early on in the career. And that gave me the opportunity to be more with the patients one-to-one. And I did family nurse practitioner. I did internal medicine, but lately I've been doing some psychiatric support of patients, either geriatric patients or just patients with anxiety and depression, etc. I'm their prescriber and I do a bit of counseling, etc. And then my PhD, I was just trying to figure out what's the next step in my career and my education. I went to a really good career counselor, and 3 days of work on this, and she came up that she thought I should be in academics, but be a professor in medical ethics. And I thought, wow, that's interesting. And I got my doctorate because you could even base it on when I was working in oncology, that I wanted a seat at the table to be an advocate for my patients, which I could do even throughout. I was the director of ethics for a hospital system that had many ministries throughout the state. And so you can do that for your own individual patients, but you can have a seat at the table to drive ethics with that doctorate degree. So I started my PhD in philosophy. And when I started, I didn't know Plato from Pluto practically. I mean, I really didn't have a lot of philosophy background, but understanding ethics and moral distress, you know, and existentialism from the greater ways that that discipline looks at things was beautiful. And then taking those concepts and applying it to the person, the other, you know, you could read in my works about the other with a capital O, the other person in front of me is kind of where it all started and why I do what I do.
Wow.
I hope that answered your question.
Definitely. And I'm so in awe of your ability to advocate on a larger scale, but also still to be close with the other in front of you and to keep touch with that existential moments, to not forget about the other and their experience and their moment. I think that's a wonderful gift, and we can learn a lot from you.
Yeah, thank you. Well, a lot of it's because of the face. We're looking at each other's face right now. And if you can really attend to that when you're at that one-to-one with a patient or even a CEO of the hospital, as you're trying to advocate for nursing and advocate for your patients, you can really be with them and kind of meet on this moral ground where you can both move ahead in honoring of each other. So
wonderful. I'll remember that the face is
the face,
starting point, and noticing and connecting.
Yeah, the philosopher that I read about that was Emmanuel Levinas, Levinas, and he talks a lot about the visage or the face. And I really find that some nurses relate to that. You know, as they are, you know, they have a patient that's in distress and they can see it, they can try to figure out what else is going on. These were through all their diagnostic abilities and their wonderful assessment, physical assessment and mental and psychiatric assessments. That kind of drives it. So, yeah.
Wow, that's so interesting. It seems to me that that is a wonderful starting point. If you say that nurses are drawn to that and it's something familiar to them, we are still on our side, still figuring out how to, we have started doing that and we already see a change in practice, and nurses tell us that they do practice presence, although they don't call it presence.
What do they say?
They would say interpersonal relationship or caring or empathy or connecting, using those terms. Yeah, so what you are saying also gives us much to think about in where to start motivating and enriching nurses' practice. So, yeah, so thank you for that.
Yeah, I would just add to their, you know, if you, in this article that you referenced, there's lots of definitions and lots of phrases that are good. And the nurses that you've just represented, those are beautiful words and beautiful orientation. The one added thing would be the sense of awe. If there's a way to capture that, and that would either imply, you know, a higher power of some sort that might be right there with you, that instead of just having a relationship with the two, could there be somebody or a mystery of some sort, or something that's a little harder to find, but yet you kind of sense that it's there, you know, as you're talking, as I'm, you know, teaching this to nurses, sometimes I talk about even love of your husband, your spouse, you know, there's more there than just a relationship. There's a awe, if you will, or there's that, you know, so anyway, that's just, I would just add to that.
Yes, no, definitely. And I still wonder how we can invite nurses to become aware of that sense of awe, because nurses can be at times tired and in a routine and forgetting about this awe. Because I also think that this will enrich our practice as nurses if we remember about the sense of awe and mystery and experiencing the moment in its fullness.
Oh yeah, there are so many barriers to this. I mean, I know that the biggest barrier is time. It's always time, you know, that we just have a million things to do and inadequate staffing to do them. And God bless them, their hard work. And I'm very, very respectful of that. So how do we compel them to sense they are? I would say begin with their stories, you know, begin talking about what's important to them, begin talking about where they see something that should be done better or different, and you know, let them have a voice. I mean, a lot of it is letting them have a voice, and they can, you know, transcend that for a time and then get back to the constraints of time and, you know, lack of a voice, unfortunately, sometimes. So it's all a journey. Yeah.
In your article, you mentioned that presence is about a mixture of empirical knowledge and metaphysical knowledge. And we've already touched on that sense of awe. So what is it? It reminds me of spirituality. If we think of metaphysical, what is your view on spirituality and how it manifests or can be linked to nursing practice?
Again, I think spirituality, if there's a wealth of information about spirituality and nursing, I think one of the common ways of thinking of that is acknowledgement of a divine power or a higher being. You know, it's, again, taking that third phenomenon that might be present when you are with a patient. So there's the two of you and you're trying to have, you know, this wonderful therapeutic relationship, but could there be the presence of something else, someone else, another entity in this phenomenon that you just say, oh my gosh, there's just so much to know and so much to think about, and how do I get, you know, more wise and more sensitive to what else could be going on in this scenario. So spirituality has, I haven't written a lot on spirituality, so I am not the best author or scholar in that regard, but I just touched on this because I think it's, you know, very important in presence, you know, to at least acknowledge that phenomenon. Yeah. That's hard to measure. It's not only hard to measure, it's probably impossible to measure, but yet it doesn't make it not real.
Definitely. What you say about that, more than just the two of us here, is so such a reality. I want to say is that we experience that, and it's beyond words, and that can play a huge role in the healing process and have much meaning for the patient and for the nurse.
Absolutely, absolutely. Have you been in your caring channel? Have you done a lot? Had other scholars doing some things on spirituality as well, or how do you see that being manifest in the work that you do?
It's also something that's there, but not that we haven't explored in depth yet. We acknowledge that definitely, and I've spoken to someone who is a spiritual leader in one of our conversations on this channel, and he said that for him presence is slowing down to a pace of care and to find that inner peace and inner calm so that we can be there for others.
Yes, good. And almost an impetus then for moral courage then, you know, you would enhance your ability to be courageous as to being an advocate for the patient and getting their needs met, if you did take the time to be present and if you really understood as much as possible within the constraints of nursing practice, understood their values and such. So that's good.
Definitely. Yes, that's such an interesting word that you use, moral courage. And also I see in the article the word moral satisfaction. So please tell us more on how you see this concept.
Well, I don't know a lot about moral satisfaction other than to experience it myself. You know, that's that's good. But moral courage, I think, is just the notion of being vulnerable, being at risk for standing up for the patient, being at risk of being mocked, if you will, by either other nurses or physicians that say, you know, that may not be important, you know, and almost not receive what you have to say. But it does take a courage, and that starts from, you know, a Socratic notion of when he defined courage and bravery. I'm sure it was more in other areas other than patient care, but what's for nurses, what's more important than patient care? You know, nothing. I mean, it's so that is a good place to start. But I think it starts with knowing the beautiful work by Barbara Carper. I think it's on knowing, and even existential knowing, I think is just so important. And I want to give her credit for that work.
Sure. Wow. Thank you. I can hear that you've really read a lot and experienced a lot in this field. And another field, or we have already mentioned that you have much experience in ethics. And I wonder how you put all of these concepts together, or how would you see the relationship between moral courage and ethics and presence?
Well, I think presence would be foundational to that, because you have to be present and acknowledge where the patient is if you're going to step out in their behalf. Obviously, ethics is a philosophical term that means the study of what the right thing to do is in a certain situations. And by the fact that there are ethical dilemmas, that means one person or two people or three people might disagree on what the right thing to do is. Then there's ethical dilemmas on how do we assert that or whatever. So I think presence comes first, to understand the patient, to be with them, to see their values, and then to step out, to be vulnerable, to be an advocate and a voice, giving the patient a voice. And when I was the director of ethics, every time there was an ethical dilemma, which there were a plethora of ethical dilemmas, I would make sure that not only family member was there, but the nurse that was taking care of the patient the majority of the time, and of course physicians or whatever, to each person have a voice in what should be done in this frustrating situation. And that's how I think they are interrelated.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I hear more times that you said to have a voice. And it seems to me that that crystallizes throughout our conversation, is that for each one to have a voice, to be heard. And that might be that also contributes to these healing moments, that I feel I'm heard, that it can bring a solution to an ethical dilemma, or resolving that. It dissolves if I can speak and say how I feel, and we share our feelings. And that is also a spiritual moment. It can be, if we really listen, and there's healing that takes place.
Absolutely. I totally agree. There definitely can be. I mean, I think even in the article that you referenced, I give an example at the end about the trajectory with a patient with her certified nurse midwife. And that whole prenatal care, building on that relationship, there's just something else going on, that the patient has much more of a voice. And I'm not saying, I don't want to talk about the difference between a certified nurse midwife versus an obstetrician. That's not my role in this conversation, but so much to honor that experience and integrating in that for this whole 9-month period, and etc. That could be lived out in that care of the infant and prenatal care. So
thank you so very much for sharing your wisdom. You are really an inspiration and a voice for nursing. So thank you so much for that.
You're welcome. My privilege.
Thank you. And I wish you all of the best, and I hope that we can continue our conversation in future.
Absolutely. Look forward to that.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.